Hey everybody, it's Anthony Newitt. Many of you know me as the music director from UCC Greenewalds, but I'm here to speak to you tonight about a completely different subject. And this subject really spooks me out. It's the subject of death. I hate the idea of it happening to me. I hate the idea of planning for it. The whole thing just bothers me. Tonight, we hosted an event at UCC Greenewalds where we invited Erin Heintzelman from Heintzelman Funeral Home, and we invited Linda Noonan, who's an extremely knowledgeable attorney. Let me tell you, I completely screwed up my uncle's estate because I tried to do it myself. I didn't seek the help of an attorney. Man, if I had heard what Linda had to say before this, I could have saved myself a whole lot of grief. You will be amazed at her knowledge. And Erin Heintzelman is just fantastic at what she does, and she just knows so much, and she's going to explain so many details about funeral planning and all of those things that we just have to deal with no matter what. So watch this video and enjoy.
Welcome, everyone. I am so glad that you took the time to come out here tonight to start some hard conversations that are really, really important. I believe the beginning of life is a beautiful, beautiful thing, but I also believe that the end of life can also be beautiful when we embrace what it is that we are doing and when we are prepared for it. So tonight in our Growing Old Gracefully program, we have Erin Heintzelman and attorney Linda Noonan with us. Welcome. We appreciate you being with us so much. What we're going to do tonight, I'm going to ask a couple questions, and we'll chat about some things, and then each of them have a presentation for all of you, and then we'll come back and ask some more questions, and at that time we can take your questions as well. Does that sound good? Excellent. I got to pull out my cheat sheet. Oh, here it is. Also, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit more than I can probably say about you. Linda, why don't you start, if you don't mind?
As you know, I'm Linda Noonan. I've been an attorney for 42 years now. My firm is a family firm. My father-in-law, Charles, started it in 1950, and he passed away a few years ago. My husband, his sister, and myself, and our daughter were all lawyers together. Unlike a lot of firms, our firm is what you call a niche firm. Lawyers aren't allowed to say we specialize like doctors, but we are allowed to have an area of concentration. And our area of concentration has always been wills, trusts, estate administration. With estate administration, we do real estate, obviously, because when people die, they have real estate. But I've never done a divorce. I don't go to court. I've never done litigation. So it's a very limited kind of practice. And as I said, we've all just done that for a number of years. Before that, I was a nurse for 8 years.
Wow.
Yes, and I like to think, I actually thought I would go into risk management when I met my husband, and then I sort of gravitated, I thought, well, there's a ready-made job. But I do think that my having been a nurse really helps because I do get to talk to people when they're in the process of dying or they've just suffered a death. So I think it really plays well together.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that about yourself. Erin?
Thank you, Pastor. So my name is Erin Heintzelman. I'm a fourth-generation funeral director. What that means is that my dad and my uncle are funeral directors. My grandfather was a funeral director, and his father before him was a funeral director, and he's the one who started our company in Schnecksville in 1938. And then most recently, my brother Matt and I purchased a funeral home in Allentown. So we are helping our dad in Schnecksville, helping our uncle in Hellertown, and now have expanded to the Allentown area as well. I've been a licensed funeral director since 2019. Which was a very pivotal time to become a licensed funeral director because I was licensed in July, and then obviously we know in March, with COVID, everything changed drastically, and so it was definitely an unique situation to be a young funeral director going through a global pandemic, but I think it definitely shaped myself and my brother as funeral directors. It's made us better and it's made us consider, when you're in a family business, you do things the way it's always been done, and COVID really challenged us to think outside the box. And so, that's how Matt and I kind of take funeral service moving forward, is remembering our roots, but also being aware of the changing environments and, the way in which we can best serve our community.
That's a lot like we have to do at church, too. The pandemic did that for us here. We want to honor the roots, but moving forward, life is different.
Right.
And we have to, as a faith community or as a family of lawyers and a funeral director, we have to look at the needs of the people we are serving now. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really important that you both recognize that. That's awesome. So why is it important to start end-of-life planning conversations earlier rather than later?
I think, Erin, you can probably address this better than I. I mean, obviously, it is the one certainty. We are all going to die. If we had a magic 8-ball, it might be easier, or a crystal ball, to know when to plan.
Yeah.
But I can tell you from having not known, my father died when I was 9, very unexpectedly, only 41 years old. So obviously no one was thinking about a death at that point in time, and it's very, very difficult, obviously, to move forward from that when you're not prepared. It's hard enough when you are prepared.
Did your parents have a will at that point?
They did not. Mm-hmm. 8 children and no will.
Well, there you go. Yeah. Anything to add?
I would just say, in that, when funerals happen or a death occurs, there's an emotional component and also a financial component. And when you have the opportunity to plan ahead, you have the ability to lay out from an emotional standpoint what you want. You can articulate that to your family. And then also you're aware of what the charges are, because with any life event, whether it's a birth or a wedding or any kind of milestone, charges, are incurred. And sometimes that financial hardship can be a deciding factor for families. And so if you can consider those finances ahead of time, you're able to better prepare and communicate your wishes to your family.
That makes a lot of sense. Knowing that expense is taken care of when it happens, and say your parents pass or whatnot, the people around you have that opportunity to spend their time doing the emotional work that they need to do, rather than also having the additional anxiety of the money.
Right. How are we going to pay for this?
Yeah.
Which is one of the reasons why we like to approach it as a team activity. So not only the attorney and the funeral director, but we get your life insurance agent involved, because you might need life insurance to cover it, to help prepare, to help have funds for your kids to go to college if you should die young. Your financial advisor should get involved. So we really try to approach it as a team approach.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. It really does. What are some of the misconceptions that you have come across in your time when people are preparing for the end of life?
There are a lot of them, unfortunately, but I think the biggest one, and the one that's caused the most heartache for me, my husband always, I bleed for my clients. It's nothing that I've done personally, but I wish that they would have talked to me ahead of time. But so often people think I don't need a will. I'm married, everything is joint husband and wife, we don't need a will. That's so often not the case, and typically not the case. It's very unusual that everything is titled jointly. And probably the one that hurts me the most is the woman had a child from a first marriage, and then she remarried and they had a child. She thought everything would pass to her husband, but she had a very large death benefit, and also unpaid unpaid salary. She hadn't taken vacation for years. So she had amassed tens of thousands of dollars, which then were paid to the estate. The husband really could have used it, but under the law, if you die without a will, if you have children, it goes the first $30,000 to the husband, and then depending on how many kids, they get, in that particular case, half. So he got the first $30,000 in half, and the other two children had to get the other half, which, as I said, it really created a lot of problems, and there's just nothing you can do about it after the fact.
So it is really important to really, no matter your age, make yourself a will, but also then I would imagine to update that as your circumstances change. Because I think a lot of times I assume you hear about, well, I wanted it to go to X, Y, and Z, but I didn't quite I never updated it, and that must cause a lot of problems.
Obviously, that's and that's part of what I'll talk about. Not only you need to update your will, we try to write wills. Sort of like the Constitution, it's written so that it's a living document. We try to talk about, are we going to have children, potentially grandchildren? We talk about issue and descendants. So we try not to name people. Some people are very intent on naming each person. Well, then if you have an afterborn grandchild, that grandchild might not be included. How terrible is that?
Yeah.
So we really do try to make it a living document, but I have an estate right now where the woman just totally forgot she had a life insurance policy, going to a trust. The trust was revoked back in 1976, and they don't want to pay it out to anybody because and it was the First National Bank of Allentown, which hasn't been in existence since 1986. So it's just going to be, we have to jump through so many hoops to have this be paid out. And it shouldn't be that difficult if people kept things up to date.
Thank you for that. That's very, very important. Well, let's see. Any other misconceptions that you may have gone through?
One of the biggest misconceptions from the funeral home standpoint is I do a lot of the pre-arrangements in our Schnecksville facility, and people come in, they haven't spoken with their family, and they sit down and they say, with good intention, I want to get this taken care of so my children don't have to worry about it. And then they proceed to say something to the effect of, I don't want anything, I just want to be either buried or cremated in whatever fashion, and I just, I don't want anything.
Don't make a big fuss. Don't make a big fuss over me.
The funerals are too sad, I don't want to put my kids through it or my grandkids through it. And while that is a very loving perspective, I always try to encourage those people to at least speak with their family about it, because I have heard countless times from my dad, who is here with us tonight, that funerals are for the living. And so while your wishes independently are important, it's also so incredibly important to talk to your family and find out how best they can grieve your loss, and listen to them. It may not align directly with what you want, but they're the ones that are left having to talk to the people in the grocery store or see people out and about and have to go through, whatever that death story was. And so to incorporate their wishes, I think, is just a big misconception.
Thank you for saying that. I think that makes a lot of sense. I've encountered that as well, where people are just, well, I don't make a big fuss. Even my mom says that now, and I'm like, Mom, we need the funeral so that we can begin a healthy grieving process for you.
Right.
All right. Well, would you like to go first? And
Sure. If I could just say one thing.
Yeah.
One thing that I do mind is we don't have obituaries anymore. And you'll be in the grocery store talking to someone and ask how they are, and only to find out that they've died. I don't make a habit of going on to the Heintzelman website to see who's passed recently.
Right. Without like a newspaper in front of you that you read every day.
Yes. So
yeah.
I really wish, but the newspapers have just gotten so horribly expensive. Obituaries are unbelievable.
So they're really only published on funeral websites usually? Is that?
We always try to encourage it, because to that point, and there's a lot of things that, like, funerals don't just happen anymore in a 5-day period. They can happen a couple weeks out, a couple months out, and like we were just talking about, there may be nothing. And so, but the morning call, they charge by the line. I mean, I had an obituary earlier today I submitted that was $978. which is just, that's a little above average, but it's pretty standard for this area, and just a normal obituary, which that's a lot of money to put out for one day.
Yeah. Oh, if you missed the paper that day, then
You're out of luck.
Then you don't know. All right. So, I guess I'll start with the usual, what documents you need. Obviously a will, as I discussed, and I believe everybody at least should discuss with an attorney whether or not you have a need for it. Even more important than a will, so Pennsylvania has a provision if you die without a will, they assume who's going to get your assets, who you'd want to get your assets. Some people think, oh, if I don't have a will, everything will go to the state. That doesn't happen. Well, I shouldn't say it doesn't happen. Pennsylvania's legislation gives it first to spouse and children. If you have no spouse and children, it goes to grandchildren. If there are no spouse, children, or grandchildren, it goes back up to grandparents if there happens to be. And that makes sense if you think about following the money, because then they get to tax it again when these elders die. If there are no grandparents, parents, children, grandchildren, they start branching out collaterally. Siblings, cousins, nieces and nephews and cousins. So there are a lot of people involved before it escheats to the state. However, as I said, there are still some very valid reasons for having a will. Some people fear probate. They hear the word probate, they want to do whatever they can to avoid probate. I can assure you probate in Pennsylvania is not a terrible thing, and it actually makes your whole estate administration move more smoothly. I think right now the average estate administration, so maybe for a $500,000 estate, the probate fees are maybe $350 to $500, somewhere in there. So it's not a good reason to not have your assets pass through your will, because some people designate beneficiaries on everything. So they have TOD accounts, they have pay on death accounts, so they have, let's say, e-bonds, pay on death to the grandchildren. They have bank accounts in joint names with their children. The problem is that then the executor sits there having to pay tax on those assets, and the executor has no money because all the money has been distributed out to the beneficiaries already. Well, the executor is the person who's responsible for paying the taxes. So now they have to get the money back from those transferees in order to pay the inheritance tax. So having everything get paid out directly to beneficiaries is not an ideal situation. Very hard for your executor. What else should I say about probate? It's not a lengthy proceeding. I'm going to tell you 99% of my estates are finalized in 1 calendar year from date of death. We typically finish it within a calendar year. The Commonwealth, we had some big changes after COVID, and I still forget things. I keep telling them at the Register of Wills office, but I've done it this way for 40 years. We scan everything now. We have to scan everything to them, and they review it, and then they let us know that it's okay, and then we have to scan things to Harrisburg. We used to just walk up to the courthouse, which is why our office was so close to the courthouse. We could just walk up. But now everything is scanned, so we could pretty much do it anywhere. But the probate proceeding is not terrible, and it finishes up quickly. And we know some things that people might miss. For example, if you pay the inheritance tax within 3 months of death, you get a 5% discount. If you pay it within those first 90 days, that technically even that 5% discount is a 10% savings. If you annualize that, it's a 10% savings. Well, you can barely invest at 10% anymore. So it's definitely a wise thing to do. If you go to the courthouse, the Register of Wills office will not give you instructions on how to do this. Some people try to do it themselves. More people wind up coming to me and saying, you know, we started it and we realized we really can't do it, so can you take over? We really don't like to get involved midstream, but we will do it if people are stuck. So wills are very important. More important than wills, though, if you ask me, because the law does at least get it to somebody in your family, are powers of attorney. Unlike a will where they assume who you'd want to get your assets, powers of attorney, they assume if you haven't named your family members, maybe there's a good reason you haven't named your family members. Maybe you don't want your sisters making decisions for you. Maybe your sisters aren't the best care, and I guess I'm saying sisters, I have 7 sisters, so maybe I'm saying it from my point of view. Maybe they aren't the best caretakers of your funds. Maybe they wouldn't do things the way you do it. So the law assumes that you don't want to name them. In that case, they might name somebody you don't know at all, a disinterested third party, who is often a young attorney just starting out, so they want to give them an opportunity to learn things. I'm not saying they don't know, but really, when I got out of law school, my secretary knew more than I did, quite honestly. It's very theoretical, the law, like anything else. You don't really, unlike Erin, I'm sure she learned how to do her craft. Law isn't like that. You have to actually do it. So I don't want a young lawyer taking care of my family members. So you need powers of attorney. Pennsylvania, just a couple of years ago, divided the powers of attorney. Powers of attorney used to include financial and healthcare. Now they're 2 separate documents, which makes a lot of sense because oftentimes family members have different skill sets. You might have one who's very good in the financial realm and another who works better in the medical field. You could use the same person for both things, but not always. Oftentimes, and it's also a nice division of labor. So some kids will take care of one type of work, and another child will take care of a different area of a work. So you can divide and conquer when you help take care of your parents. It is a big concern. Not me so much anymore, but not so long ago, 5 years ago, I was really part of the sandwich generation. I still had a child at home, and I had parents who we were taking care of. And we were still working. So that it definitely squeezed your time. If you're helping taking care of elderly parents and you have your considerations of your kid who's in college, it's a lot on your plate. And the sandwich generation is going to be around for some time. So to the extent that you can help them have things in place to help them take care of you, that's really a blessing to them. They need all the help they can get, and to have the necessary documents in place is very important. One of the things that parents do, which I don't think they consider, but they'll put a child on their bank account because it's convenient. And I can honestly tell you, my mom had my name on the bank account. I always made sure that it was a very small bank account because I traveled quite a bit. I flew, I drive back and forth to New Jersey every weekend. The chance of me being killed, before my natural time was high. And if I had died, my mother's bank account would have been taxed in my estate, even though it was her money. So you have to consider, if you put kids' names on the account, or your siblings, I see that quite often. I have elderly brothers and sisters who put everything on each other's names. Well, when the other one dies, that estate, whether it's their funds or not, gets taxed in their estate. So you definitely need to talk to somebody so you understand what you're doing when you make these choices. And I have to say, I wish bankers didn't make these suggestions because they aren't lawyers. But they'll often say, "Oh, this is what you want to do. You want to put a person's name on it for convenience. It'll help you." You really don't want to do that. You can put a person's name on it as power of attorney. Get them on as a power of attorney as an agent, but not as a joint owner. They have the same wherewithal to sign checks and to take care of you that way. Let's see, medical, so then the healthcare power of attorney is the second one now. The people with the healthcare powers of attorney, if you have the old kind where it has both things involved, and that's another thing we encourage you to keep up to date. It's harder to convince people. I'll have somebody call and say, "This power of attorney is no good, it doesn't have this provision." Well, it does. It's just tucked in there on page 3, halfway down. But they're used to seeing a certain form, and it's not the right form. If they're not used to seeing it in a certain format, they'll say, oh no, this doesn't fly. Well, it does, but we have to convince them. So you do want to update your documents just because people get accustomed to seeing the new improved forms. All right. You need to talk to your financial advisors about what things you're giving your children. You know, as you age, you might need extra income, so you want to liquidate things to income your stream. You might want to buy an annuity to have an income stream. You need to think about your IRA distributions. Those are all things you really need to talk to your accountant and your financial advisor about ahead of time, and to make sure you're not pulling funds from an account or an asset that maybe would be something best left alone and let your kids inherit it. For example, if you bought PP&L stock or Neff's Bank stock, that's an even better one, Neff's Bank stock when it was $10 a share and it's now worth $1,000 a share, if you sell that now, you pay capital gains on that, the difference between what you paid for it and what it's worth. Where instead, if you let your kids inherit it, they inherit it at the new basis, that $1,000 that it's reported on the inheritance tax return. If they then sell it the next day, there's no capital gains. Capital gains rates start at 35%. So you don't want them paying 35% on something which if they had waited until you died, they would have gotten the new basis in it. So it's important to understand as you need assets, what assets you use that'll help keep your nest egg as big as possible for your kids. All right. I think a trust. Let's just talk about a trust real quickly. Lots of people, not so much anymore, but for a long time, people would come and say, my neighbor has a trust, I think I need a trust. Because the federal exemption right now is $15 million. And right now, it's supposed to be permanently $15 million until the next administration comes in and changes it, I guess. But so we don't have many people worried about a federal estate anymore. So the need for trust have dropped off substantially. But there are some still really good, valid reasons for having a trust. Special need children. I have a client whose wife is going to be blind in a very short period of time. And she, in all likelihood, will survive her husband. And that's another thing I think is very important, is you have to be realistic when you're making these plans. Just as Erin said, you have to know, yes, mom doesn't want a big shindig, but the family might need it. The same thing is true with estate planning. You have to figure out what works for everybody. So in this particular case, when you decide who your trustees are going to be or who your executor is going to be, yeah, you love all your kids the same, but really, you probably know which one is best able to handle it. You know, one might be better than the other, or maybe you know one really shouldn't do it at all. And the same thing is true with distributions. Do you give everything outright to all of them? Maybe you have a child who has a medical issue, or you have a child who's got a drug problem. You need to think about those things really realistically and hard and say, okay, what can we do to protect this child from himself or herself? And there are ways that can be done. So that is an important aspect. Special needs kids, if you know somebody is going to need long-term care, kids born out of wedlock. Maybe you had a child you gave up for adoption, but you wanted to make a gift to that child without anybody knowing. Wills are public documents. You can go into the Register of Wills office in Lehigh County and look at anybody's will. Just tell them the name, give them a vague idea of when the person died, and they can show you. It's a matter of public record. Trusts, on the other hand, are not. So if there's anything you want to do that you don't want the world to know about, you do it in a trust. All right. Okay, shall we open up the questions now, or do you want to let Erin present and then? Okay. All right. So we'll
get my microphone on.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
And if you have a question, I'll bring you a microphone so that everybody can hear it.
Okay. Any questions? Yes.
How
Oh, hold on. And I wasn't texting, I was taking notes, just so you know. I don't want you to think I was up there on my phone.
How often should you update?
Can you get closer?
How often?
Oh, she must have turned it off. I had it on. Oh. Okay.
Okay, how often should you update? It really depends. Different life, certainly at major life events. If there is a death in the family, a divorce in the family, grandchildren, children born, those kinds of things, you have to review your documents to see, does it take into account this life event? One of the things my office does, and I can tell you it happened in 1984 when I just got out of law school, TEFRA, the tax economic, I don't even remember what it stood, but I worked 16 to 18-hour days to make everybody comply with TEFRA. We send, if there is a major tax change in the law that affects our clients, so we have databases of people who, have over $5 million who fall in this line. So we can send a letter to everybody and say, you need to consider this. We used to send annual letters to everyone, but now it's 78 cents a piece. We don't really do that anymore. So we do encourage people when we see them, though, to update it. So you really have to consider it. I like to tell my clients, when you change your battery in your smoke detector, think about reviewing your documents. So once a year, look at your documents just to see if they still meet with what your wishes are. Okay.
Just make sure you don't have those lithium batteries that last for 10 years.
There you go.
Any other questions for Linda?
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I'll just leave this here. I'll grab that later. All right, go ahead, Erin.
Okay, good evening, everyone, officially. I do have a PowerPoint over here. I will just kind of touch on it as I go. I often go off on tangents, so that's what... No, this is good. This is a great place to start. Perfect. Thank you so much. So just to start with a few key statistics that I personally find interesting, 89% of funeral homes in the United States are family-owned, which is a unique statistic when you think about industries across the country. Funeral homes, there are two major corporations that own most of the corporate funeral homes, but in this area specifically, the vast majority are family-owned and operated. Another big question people ask me is, how many people get cremated in a year? And so I included the most recent statistic is in 2023. The national average was 60.5% is the cremation rate. Alternatively, the 30.4% is the burial rate. And I went to Parkland, but I'm pretty sure that doesn't equal 100. And so people ask me, well, where's that other 10%? The other 10% would include burials out of state or being sent somewhere out of the country, as well as body donation, whole body donation to different colleges that use people as cadavers for doctors. And then the last statistic is 36% of Americans have talked to family members or have made prearrangements. So that's not too many when we consider how many people are here. So that's 3 to 4 out of every 10 people have only spoken about their prearrangements. And like we were talking about earlier, having that communication with your family so that if a death does occur in an untimely manner and you aren't prepared in that state of emotion and grief, your family can revert to the conversations that they've had with you when the tensions weren't as high. The next slide talks about, what does a funeral director do? A lot of times people aren't quite sure what we do until they're in a funeral process with us. So obviously we're there to provide comfort. Most often we do that at a first call, which means when somebody does pass, we are the ones that go and bring that person into our care, whether that's in a home or at a hospital or at a nursing home. Often that's the time that you first meet the funeral director generally. And then we also provide our experience. That's often shown in the arrangement process while we sit with our families and give our experience and give our guidance in order to be able to provide you with the services that best fit the needs of you as the family and also the loved one that's passed. And then lastly, we're there to support. So we do that in a couple ways. We're there throughout the funeral process, and then we also do aftercare support. And we arrange for things like grief share, and we offer different events throughout the year in order to help people get through some of the more trying times throughout the grieving process. We touched on the next slide, but I included a lot of the funeral misconceptions. And the big one was that funerals make us too sad, so we're not going to do anything. And then the other one I hear is funerals are inconvenient. We got family from all out of town. We don't want to make them fly in. Also, people say funeral and cremation are the same. They're actually very different. Funerals oftentimes will refer to with the body present. So when you see something in the newspaper in an obituary and it says a funeral service, that's how you know there's going to be a casket. If you see something that says a memorial service or sometimes a celebration of life, depends on if the family writes it, that means without the body present. By definition, a memorial service is cremation normally or no urn. And so that's a good way to tell whether you're going to a funeral service or a memorial service. Funerals should reflect what your loved one wanted, and I touched on that earlier. They absolutely should. That's not necessarily a misconception, but they should also be your wishes as the family members should also be considered. Funerals are only for religious people. We're in a church, and my dad has always taught me that we never charge any extra for going to church. Some funeral homes do because you have to take all your stuff, but my dad has always taught us that if a family is a church member and they want to go to church, we wouldn't want it to be a financial burden on them to be a reason for them not to go to church. But in the same breath, as pastor, you know, people's faith ebb and flow in life, and when a death occurs, sometimes people do tend to shy away from their faith, and as a result, there's that misconception that we're not going to have anything because our faith and we're not on the same page with God, and so we're not going to do anything. And that's a misconception because you can always do something to honor a life that's been lived. And then funerals are only for adults. I touch on that one a little bit because people do ask me a lot about if there's grandkids, like at what age should kids be coming to funerals? And I always have been told and been taught that you leave it up to the child, and if the child's too young to make that determination on their own, then you just communicate with them what they're going to see, and you're there to answer questions honestly and openly, and not to shield them from it. As we talked about earlier, death is unfortunately one of those things that none of us will escape, and so the earlier that a child can be exposed to a healthy grieving process has been shown to be very helpful as they grow and they age and they go through the grieving process on their own. Next slide. So there are several ways in order you can celebrate the life that someone has lived. You can do a traditional funeral where there's a visitation and a funeral that could be held at a funeral home. It could be held at a church. That's what funeral directors typically will call that a traditional funeral because that's what we think about from generations ago, where sometimes you'll have the nighttime viewing or the now more common of viewing the hour or two beforehand. Then you go and have the church service or the funeral home service, and you go on to the cemetery for a burial. That's oftentimes public, meaning it's open to everyone. The time is announced in an obituary, and it's for anyone who wishes to come in and share in the loss that person has left. There are also services that are private in nature. Private to me doesn't mean small, just means invite only. And so what that is sometimes with family structures or things that people have different stories in life, and sometimes they wish not to have everybody there for their service, and so the family may elect to have a private service. And so that's really what that means, is just invite only, and then the family does the inviting, and that's all it is. And then as a result, there's also, I wanted to touch on the whole memorial service component. Memorial services can be held outdoors. They can be held at restaurants. They can be more celebratory in nature. They can be more traditional in nature, where you have a funeral home setting or a church setting. But certainly with memorial services, there is more of a opportunity to be creative in order to really truly celebrate the life that's been lived. I talked about that slide too, so we'll pass right through that one. Death certificates is a topic that I get asked on a lot, and Attorney Noonan, you can probably help me with this as well. But death certificates are, so if I pass away, it's my signature in death, because I'm not here to sign off on titles and deeds and bank accounts. I always instruct people, and tell me if I'm wrong, but it's always proper to present an original. And then say, for example, Neff's Bank or a local title transfer notary chooses to make a copy and they give you back the original. That's a gift. You can continue to use that original copy, but it's always proper to present the original.
You absolutely are. You're not permitted. It actually states on the document itself that it is illegal to make a photocopy of a death certificate. So if you're presenting it to prove death, you have to show the original.
That's what I thought too. A lot of people, and it's interesting, in this post-COVID world that we all navigate, a lot of places will take copies, and so I am following the law, and I'm telling a family, you need one for a bank account, you need one for a deed, you need one for a title, life insurance, estate, stocks, bonds, etc. Anything that is a legal document that you would need to sign off on and you're not here to do. And then sometimes people make a liar out of me and they take copies. And so then families will come back to me and they'll say, we only went through 3 and I got 10. But then alternatively, I have some families say we only need 3, and then they come back and they need 7 more. So it's very specific to the individual. It's very circumstantial based on the companies that you use, the banks that you use, things like that. And so we can always get more. They're $20 a copy, whether we get them the date of death, or 1 year from the date of death, or 10 years from the date of death. That's a change from 2017.
Thank goodness for it.
Yes, exactly.
We used to have to get, if you didn't get enough right away and you missed that window, you would wait 3 to 5 months to get additional ones. So being able to get the extras very quickly now, it's so nice. We do just what you do, and we help them count how many we think, but there are some absolutes for needing it. For example, when you are probating the will, you absolutely must have an original. If you're dealing with real estate, you absolutely must have an original. A car title, John Yurkonik absolutely wants an original. When we can, we scan it, because it doesn't say it's illegal to scan it. So we do scan things, and if they take a scan, that's fine. But we put a sticker on it and ask them to return it to us after it's served the purpose. And about half the time we get that one back. So we always used to say 10 to 15, but that was also, since I practiced, they were $3, $6, $9, and now $20. So it's gone up substantially. But about half the time we get them back.
That's a very good idea to put a sticker on it. And that's something I might use moving forward, because it's a gray area with this scanning. You're in a company, life insurance company like Prudential, and they live in, and their headquarters might be in Missouri. So what are you going to do except scan it, right? Like you want to get the ball rolling, and why would you mail it when you could email it? And so oftentimes that's an example of one where you would just scan the death certificate and email it off to Prudential so that they can continue on with their claim. So I like that idea, attorney.
And bizarre, like UGI will want to see an original. You can't tell me you're going to keep this death certificate. I just don't believe you've got a pile of death certificates somewhere.
Right.
So we try to get it back or scan it to them and see if that'll help. Yeah.
I like that idea.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
I'm sorry to make you walk. How long? Oh, I thought you.
It's on.
It is on. It's not working. How's that? Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. How long do I have to hold on to the death certificates? For instance, my brother's wife died 4 years ago, and I still have a couple of hers.
Forever. I'll answer it.
Oh, forever?
Forever. You will be surprised. I have people 50 years after someone has died. I don't know if you make a point of looking at unclaimed property in the Pennsylvania
No, you told me
Treasury.
I should. I will.
Absolutely. and you will then need a death certificate.
Okay.
So no, absolutely don't throw death certificates
Okay.
away.
Thank you.
Yep. Definitely. Because it is harder to get death certificates after the fact. You do have to wait 8 to 10 weeks typically to get a death certificate for someone who has passed away years ago. And so oftentimes when you do have a need, you need it quickly for something like oftentimes when another person passes, the need for a death certificate from someone previous. So say, for example, without knowing anything about your family, will say like someone else in your family listed your brother's wife as a beneficiary, and then that person dies, and then you may need the death certificate from your brother's wife in order to then collect on the beneficiary. So things come up. It's always a good idea to have 1 or 2 extra and then just keep them in that file. Very good.
I just have one thing, Erin. Could you mention about anybody who's been in the military for the death certificates?
Yes. So death certificates, there's another little gray area, but if you are a veteran, you get death certificates. You get 10 death certificates for free. And then sometimes, this is the gray area part, if the spouse of a veteran passes away first, and the next of kin would be the spouse, the veteran, then that person would get death certificates as well, free through the VA, 10. The difference is, say the veteran would pass away first, and then the spouse would pass away second, that would leave the next of kin as somebody different, sometimes a child or a sibling. And then the case for free death certificates no longer exists. And that used to be, free death certificates used to be for a veteran unlimited. We used to get 20 when I started just a mere 6 years ago. It went down to 10. It then went down to 5, and now it went back up to 10. But anything due a veteran, we're going to get a little deeper into what some of the free things veterans can get. And so I'll talk on that a little more, but that's a good question. Any other questions? Yes.
Would you just repeat about when the veteran dies, and then if the wife would die, does she
Yes.
get copies free?
So say the veteran is a male and he passes away first, his spouse, his wife, would get free death certificates for him because he's the veteran. If she passes away first and the husband, the veteran, is the legal next of kin, and his name is on the death certificate as the informant, the legal next of kin, as well as his name's on the honorable discharge or the DD 214, the wife can get death certificates as well for free. The only time the spouse of a veteran does not get free death certificates is when the veteran passes away first, the wife passes away second, leaving the next of kin being someone other than the veteran as the legal next of kin. And that doesn't, so say your son is a veteran and you put him down, it does not count. It has to be a spouse. And so if you pass away as a spouse of a veteran and your husband predeceased you and he's the veteran, and you cannot get free death certificates then. So that's why it gets a bit of a gray area now. That's a relatively new situation that we have had to combat. Yes, sir.
All right. Do I understand if the wife passes away first, the husband is the veteran? Mm-hmm. Now he passes away, the daughter or the son will not get...
They will get free death certificates because he has an honorable discharge. He's the veteran. It's just the one way with the spouse passing away second and then the veteran not being there as, the legal next of kin. Any other questions on death certificates? Okay, so the next slide talks about Social Security, which is another big hot topic in our world. Social Security, we as funeral directors notify Social Security of someone's passing. We do that automatically through the death certificate system. So as soon as we open our through the Department of Health, we have our eVitals, which is where our death certificates come through. As soon as we do that, we put the person who's passed Social Security number in. It automatically notifies Social Security, reoccurring prescriptions, and what's the other one? Oh, Medicaid. Medicaid, the other is the last one. It does a three hits so that you don't have to do that as the surviving family members. The thing with Social Security, to the best of my knowledge, and Attorney Noonan, feel free to jump in, you are paid a month in advance when you go on Social Security for this specific purpose. And the purpose is when you pass away at some point in the month, the next month is, so it's for the last, so when you pass away, say you pass away in September, you pass away on September, whatever today is, the 11th, whatever you get in September is yours to keep. But because you didn't live through the entire month of September, whatever comes in October is not yours anymore. And that's because you're paid in a month in advance for that purpose.
I think you're saying it backwards. So you're paid a month in arrears. So
okay.
Yes. So
I'm dyslexic.
So in September is your August payment.
Yes.
So you have to live all of August to get the September payment.
Right.
Yes.
And then tell me if I'm wrong again. If the spouse the surviving spouse gets the higher amount. So if, for example, say the husband worked and then the wife worked as well, but the husband ended up making more in Social Security and he passes away first, the wife will receive his amount.
That's been changed.
Really?
So, yes. So there is an adjustment. So it may work out to be that, but it may not necessarily work out to be that.
Okay.
And
that doesn't happen automatically anymore. It used to.
And no, they actually have to have either a phone conversation or a visit with the SSA. Yes.
So, and that's something that's changed over the last maybe 4 or 5 years, yes. Because I used to tell people that happens automatically after a month or two. Yep. If something hasn't changed, give Social Security a call, but it should happen. But more recently, I have instructed our families that we're serving, really no matter what, to call Social Security, because although we do notify them, it is not always accurate, and they don't do anything if you don't talk with them.
Well, and the other thing that I'm seeing a lot just recently is some banks, and primarily credit unions, as soon as they're notified of the death, they do the reclamation. They send the payment back to Social Security when they're entitled to it. And then you have to jump through all kinds of hoops. So you have to pay attention. And I have one right now where the person died on April 1st. Mm-hmm. They were alive in April, so they are entitled to that March payment. But So you need to be your own advocate. You need to watch for those kinds of things.
And I would say most funeral homes will have a number to give you to call Social Security, but your local Allentown office or Bethlehem office will help you. I always tell our families that Social Security will never call you. They won't really ever email you. If they want to get in touch with you, they will send you something in the mail.
Always.
Always. So if somebody calls you and they say they're from Social Security, they're here, they want to talk to you about it, I can pretty much guarantee you that's not Social Security, that's a scammer.
Right.
And we've had situations where, unfortunately, people do target, this isn't sexist, but they target widows where the woman has the husband has passed and it leaves a woman in a home, and they will call and decide that try to scam the women out of their Social Security. And so just be extra vigilant, because there are, unfortunately, all too often, those kind of situations do happen. So moving into pre-arrangements, we'll go right to the next slide. So in a pre-arrangement, if somebody calls us and says they want to make pre-arrangements, we have them come into the funeral home, because oftentimes I prefer to just have a one-on-one conversation with you. And the first part is getting vital statistical information. That's the information that we would need in order to fill out a death certificate, as well as help start a first draft obituary. Then to take it one step further is we talk about selecting services. So do you want a direct cremation? A direct cremation means no viewing. Do you want a hybrid service, which is a traditional funeral, but instead of going to the cemetery, you go to the crematory? Or do you want a traditional service, which is, the viewing, the funeral, and then burial in a casket? Then from there, we take it another step where we will even select merchandise if that's what the person would want. It's very convenient if you can pre-select merchandise, as that can really dictate the overall cost of a funeral. So if it's important to someone to prepay for funerals, which is, we'll get into that shortly, it's very important to have at least some idea of the merchandise that you would want, whether you would want a metal casket or a wood urn or no urn or whatever that may be. We're able to get a much better estimate if we know what kind of merchandise you would like. So there are two types of prearranging funerals: passive prearrangements and active prearrangements. Passive prearrangements should be done by every single person. That is where you specifically write your wishes down, and you can do that on a funeral home website. Oftentimes there's a guide on any of the funeral home websites in the area. You can do this in a lot of the pre-need guideline books that they have, which I brought some tonight. If you would wish to take one home, you just see me afterwards. And it's just merely an opportunity for you to write your wishes down. And then the idea is that you would share that with your family. Absolutely no contact to a funeral home is needed. It's just for you to think about what you want and then articulate that to your family. Active prearrangements is what I do almost every afternoon. It's where you come into the funeral home, we talk about what you want, we get an idea of your hymns that you would like, what kind of music, if you want certain people to be pallbearers or read scripture verses. We really get the whole picture of the funeral together, so that a lot of that is taken care of, so that if a death occurs, we can sit down with your family and say, this is what mom or dad or brother or sister had wanted. It's not legally bound, so you can certainly change anything, but at least the guideline is there. Moving into active prearrangements again, so we kind of talked about this earlier, but that's picking out caskets. If you want a crucifix or a cross in the casket, if you want to be cremated, do you want part of your cremated remains separated so that you can have part of you go to Yosemite and the other part of you go to the Atlantic beach? Or does that really rub you the wrong way? Would you really rather not be separated? Would you rather be kept together? So those are things that you want to think about. We can write it down on paper so that you can articulate that to your families. The last stage is advanced funeral planning, and that's taking it by recording your wishes at the funeral home and then also funding the expenses in advance. So we'll talk about pre-funding funerals in just a second, but when we are pre-funding funerals, we think about things like, what cemetery are you going to? Cemeteries charge, even though you already have the space, they charge for things called opening and closing. They charge for oftentimes a vault. They charge for setup and vault inspection fees, and those costs can really impact the overall finances of a funeral. Flowers are a hot topic because unfortunately flowers have become relatively expensive. So do you want flowers from everybody, or do you just want one piece from everybody? We talked about how obituaries have become expensive, so we talk about, do you want it in the local papers like the Parkland Press or the Whitehall Copley Press, or would you rather put it in, is it important enough for you to put it in the morning call? Do you find that value in that? We talk about, are you in organizations? What kind of memberships are you in? Things like that. What was important to you, so that when your family comes to us, they're not thinking about, oh, was Mom a member of the Lions Club in the 80s? We normally have all that written out in advance, so they don't have to think about that. We talk about pictures, if you want clothing, what kind of clothing you want, military involvement. So if you're a veteran, do you want the Army Honor Guard to come out? Do you want to play taps? Do you want the Legion to come out and do a 21-gun salute? All those kind of things. We get all those details ironed out ahead of time, because the more we can iron out ahead of time, we can get a better estimate of charges, and we can also get your wishes down for your family. So there are methods of pre-planning, pre-financing a funeral. When you prepay for a funeral, it's held under your individual Social Security account, or your Social Security number. So it is your money up until the day services are rendered. It's not funds. When you prepay for a funeral, those monies can't go into the day-to-day operations of a funeral home. And that is standard across the entire state of Pennsylvania. And so we have to, as a funeral home, we're not commission driven. 100% of the funds go into an account for you for your services, for your funeral services. And so for us at our funeral home, I am most familiar with certificate of deposits and life insurance. But there is also a third way, which is a trust account, and some funeral homes use that as well. But it's all the same concept. The concept is, the funeral home puts their umbrella around it so that the money can't be used for anything other than your funeral. A nursing home can't use it for your care. You can't use it for Christmas. You can't buy a car. It is strictly for your funeral. And once it's done, more often than not, at least for us, it's always irrevocable, meaning once you do it, you can't undo it. It doesn't mean that you have to stick with that particular funeral home for the rest of your life. It just means that money is earmarked for your funeral for the rest of your life.
If I could add something, if you go into a nursing home, one of the things they will require you to do is to have a irrevocable burial account, whether it's a trust account, a CD, or a life insurance policy. From my point of view, as Erin said, if it's a CD, that CD still belongs to you as of date of death. It doesn't belong to them until services are rendered. So that CD will appear on your inheritance tax return as an asset. However, we will offset that asset with a deduction on the deduction schedule. The same thing is true of a burial trust fund. However, it is not true of life insurance. Pennsylvania does not tax life insurance. So if you have a life insurance policy, that policy will not appear on your inheritance tax return, but you can still show the deduction. So,
do you want to talk about, and maybe I think you would be better to talk about this, if, say you go into a nursing home and you already have a life insurance policy that you got when you were 50 years old.
Yes.
What is the best way for families to utilize the money? Should they cash it out?
No.
Should they?
You must assign the ownership. Absolutely. So you've had a life insurance policy. I mean, you can take me, for example, got a life insurance policy before I turned 21, a $5,000 face. It's now worth $11,000. If I were to cash it in now, I might get $6,000 for it, but it's going to be $11,000 if I wait and use it for my burial tomorrow. So you would have lost all of those earnings. So absolutely, you want to assign the ownership to the funeral home to be used toward your burial, and then you get the full value of what it's worth. And no, it's a very good way of funding payment of life insurance.
Absolutely. And that's go ahead.
No, I was just going to, I don't want to interrupt what you're saying, but there is a major difference between whole and term life insurance as
absolutely,
well.
yes.
So what you were just speaking about, Linda, is whole life insurance where it grows with you, right?
Yes.
Or, yeah.
Yes.
So I know I've come in contact with someone in the past who thought she had purchased whole, realized it was term, and felt like,
Yeah, term insurance has no cash surrender value.
right.
Correct.
Okay, 1 second, let me.
Thank you. So if you have life insurance, say I'm just throwing out a number, say 100,000, and your funeral proceedings cost maybe 20, where does the extra 80 go?
We would always put a second beneficiary. So the funeral home, in order to get paid from a funeral home perspective, is we have to submit a bill, like a funeral bill. They pay us down to the penny. And then the rest of the funds, the funeral home has no clue what your life insurance policy is. We're not privy to that information, and I really don't want to know that information. All I just want to know is that that money is safeguarded for someone for their funeral, so it can't be used as money for someone's care, because as Attorney Noonan spoke about, if the cash value, a nursing home would be happy to cash out a life insurance policy.
Well, and that's where we need to go, Lee. A very good question. So you cannot use that policy to pay for your burial because you're only permitted to exceed the cost of the burial by 12%, I think, or 20%. So they would not allow you to use that policy to prepay your burial if you're on medical assistance. And that's really where I am. So I'm coming from, you're in the nursing home and they're requiring you to prepay your burial. So in that particular case, you cannot use a big policy like that, a big life insurance policy. But as Erin mentioned, if you aren't on medical assistance and you're just prearranging your burial, yeah, she just has a beneficiary. And let's say, so let's say you have a $25,000 policy and your funeral is $16,000. So you're not exceeding whatever the percentage is, and it changes with the cost of living, so I'm not sure what it is. So that the excess, it's an advantage to do that also because unclaimed property is another aspect of medical assistance planning. Unclaimed property, Pennsylvania has to go after the estate. Any money that they've paid on your behalf, they're entitled to take it back. They're entitled to get it back. The beneficiary of a life insurance policy, it never comes back into the estate, so it's not subject to estate recovery. So those extra funds would be paid to the second named beneficiary. So it is definitely an advantage. Yes.
If you prepay your funeral arrangements, say today, and they take out an insurance policy to cover the $11,000, and you live for another 5 to 10 years, will that cover the funeral, or does the living person have to pay the difference between now and 5 years from now?
So fantastic question. So the short answer is I can speak from my experience. And that's not going to say this is standard across all funeral homes, but at our funeral home, what you're asking is it guaranteed? And for us, no, it's not. The funeral cost is not guaranteed. However, the life insurance makes a set percentage. So oftentimes it's our job as funeral directors to find the best vehicles for your money. And so right now we have 2 life insurance companies that we use, and the average APR is about 4%. And so in theory, right now, today, If you put money away at 3.8 or 4%, yes, the idea is that would more than cover the average inflation costs of a funeral. However, in, say, 2012, when I wasn't a funeral director, but I know that rates were not very good, and funeral costs were going up, there was not enough money to cover those accounts. And then, yes, the funeral home would then say to their family or to their estate, the vast majority is covered, but for whatever reason, maybe the obituary went up or the cemetery charges went up, perhaps a casket change, something in that made the cost of the funeral not keep up with the vehicle that it was in. And so then, yes, the family would have to pay the difference. In my experience, it's not very much because, again, the vast majority is already paid for and it is making money. It's not at a set zero rate. And so there are some funeral homes that will, I think, guarantee some of their charges. It's just not something I'm used to doing because in the same breath, if there's over in the account, I give that all back to the family, even if it's $20. We don't keep a penny more than we work for. So, if there's extra in the account, that's oftentimes what I will advise. I don't know if that's legal or not, but
Yes.
if there's a little extra in the account, we give it back to the family, and then that way, that money is there for them because we don't want it. We just want to be paid for what we personally did to help honor someone's life. So if there's extra, it goes back. If there's a difference, unfortunately, the family would be required to pay the difference. But
Erin, do you allow them to make adjustments? Let's say it is a little bit higher. Can they take out a flower car or something
absolutely.
to?
We get creative, and there's differences. So sometimes you're prepaying for a funeral because it's ease of mind just to know it's done and it's over with and you don't have to think about it anymore. And then you sometimes have to pay for a funeral, like Attorney Noonan was talking about, when all of your assets have decreased to a certain threshold and you're looking at medical assistance in order to pay for your life and for your care at a nursing home. And before you can get accepted on Medicaid, you have to prepay for a funeral. There's a threshold that you can't hit, you can't go above.
Every county has a figure.
And I think right now we're at about $16,000 for a funeral if you're on medical assistance. But if you're not on medical assistance and you just want to prepay your funeral, you can put as much away as you wish. And then that just goes back to the family. So if there's a need and there's a reason why the burial account didn't keep up with inflation, we can be creative. We can find ways to make it more affordable and within the means at which mom, dad, brother, sister had put the money away for.
I'm sure your dad remembers, as I did when I started practicing, we always, for prearranged, prepaid, we always got money back because interest rates were 18% back then in the late 80s.
One instance, I gave $3,855 back to a family after they got exactly what they wanted. But the point I'd like to make real quick is, remember 2008 when the housing debacle took place? This is why we as funeral homes can't guarantee funerals anymore. We've never come back from that.
Correct.
Never. We're coming out of it now, but in the last administration, we had high inflation, and the rates are still low. We're not making any gains on our investments. We're all working longer. We're not making the money that we used to make. I think when I was a young boy, I'm thinking, boy, was I so wrong. I'm going to work my whole life, save $1 million, 6%, plus my Social Security. I'm golden. Boy, was I wrong. So that's why in 2011, 3 years after 2008, my brother and we spoke, and I said, we're losing money on all these prearrangements. We can no longer guarantee the cost. That was the same year as my dad passed away. And I don't know that he would be real happy about that, but we couldn't continue to lose money because caskets and morning call, there were so many factors in a funeral that we have no control over. I can control my costs, but I can't control everyone else's because there's so many factors that go into a funeral today. Make sense?
Erin, not all funeral homes give back the money, correct?
No, that is something based on the individual funeral home that you choose. Something I would recommend if you are in the arena of wanting to prepay for your funeral. I have thoughts on it. I would much rather give money back to whomever is the case, but some funeral homes would rather not. And just to play devil's advocate, their thought process is they took the risk on the investment. Oftentimes that comes when they guarantee the funeral. So if they guarantee the funeral and they say, yes, if you put X amount away today, we'll be sure that you are getting exactly what you want in 20 years from now. And so their thought process is if they took the risk, they get the reward of keeping the extra. It's not what we do. I'm not used to that. I can't even say it smoothly because it just doesn't feel right. But to that point also, there are funeral homes. That's why I always recommend if you're not sure if you're going to stay in the area, but you want to prepay for your funeral, I recommend a life insurance company and doing like a National Guardian Life or a Homesteaders, something that's easily transferable from funeral home to funeral home, cross state lines, something that every funeral home has access to. A certificate of deposit is great, except it's local to the bank at which your funeral home opened it at. Similarly to a trust account, the trust account I don't know too much about. I will put that out. But it's called the Pennsylvania Secure Choice Trust, and that's a Pennsylvania trust. So it's one of those options where I think it's easy enough in Pennsylvania to move those funds, but I think you run into some more roadblocks if you move, say, to Arizona or somewhere. Nothing is impossible, but for ease of convenience, I would always recommend a life insurance policy through a funeral home if you wish, if you think there's a chance that you could possibly be moving and your funeral wouldn't be in the state in which you prepaid the funeral. Any other questions? We talked about this already, but why you prearrange a funeral, there's two reasons, emotional and financial. The emotional component is obvious. You want to be able to focus on the grieving process and then, have the details all ironed out ahead of time. Financially, it's always good to know in advance, where we're at from a cost perspective so that burden is eliminated or at least thought upon prior to someone's passing. You can pass that.
It's a pretty picture.
That's our horse-drawn carriage. Ways to customize a funeral: photo collage, personal items that showcase the life well lived, movie tributes. We offer that at our funerals. All of our funeral homes have TVs, and we make the videos for our families. So that is something that we're very proud to do. We love doing it. Thank you. We love them, and then they're a keepsake for the family. So it's something that you can revert back to when you're on an anniversary of someone's passing or a first holiday, or sometimes you just miss that person. You can revert back to the video that we lovingly made for you. And all of these are options that we can do to personalize funerals. Flowers, yeah, tons of ways. We try to always look. I would say for us at our funeral home, we're always looking for ways to personalize a funeral. My dad and I talk about how there is, you can never redo a funeral. And so for us, we get up every morning and we try our best to make every funeral perfect. And our goal is to always make every person that's in our care feel like they're the only person in our care. And so the ways we do that are making sure if mom really liked a certain kind of rose, that rose is in the flower spray. Or if mom or dad really liked the beach, we have the beach scene on our TV playing. Just to listen and to hear that every story, every life is a story. And so we just try to be there to help tell it.
Of course, the music is the best, too.
We got the great piano man. Mr. Anthony knew it. Our piano never stays in tune, though, so We're working on that.
Sounded okay to me.
Thank you. So we did a lot of questions, but any questions people have? Yes, ma'am.
If you're getting very specific and picking out, exactly what casket you want and you don't die for 20 years, it's going to not be made anymore. Like, how does that work?
So that's a good question. I would say the vast majority of caskets that we offer have been made and will be continued to be made. Those are things that we look at. We look at the most popular or the best-selling merchandise for our families so that it is made for years to come. There are certain caskets that, sure, they do go out of stock, and they don't get made anymore, but prior to them going out of stock, the Batesville company or the Matthews Casket Company will come to us as a funeral home and say, if someone really liked this casket called the Sutter, here is an example of a casket that's going to be the most similar. And so during COVID, we saw there were a lot of we couldn't get certain caskets for whatever reason, maybe from a logistics standpoint or just an overuse standpoint, but we always would get the same or better quality. So sometimes that does happen with like wood caskets in particular. If a certain wood you can't get, an oak or something like that, you'll get a better casket than what you had previously selected.
And this is backtracking. I thought I understood it, but I don't, so I'm going to ask it. It was said about putting a sticker on a death certificate. What did you
Just
mean?
a 3M sticker that says, please return this after it's served its purpose. And then we send a self-addressed stamped envelope, and half of the time they return it to us.
Okay.
Half of the time, I'm sure they toss it all in the garbage. But
And
Okay.
that's particularly useful when places like AT&T or UGI,
Right.
the utility companies, want a death certificate for proof. But why give them a $20 piece of paper when they're just going to shred it?
exactly.
So if they can send it back, that's another death certificate you could use.
And I understand why they need it. I understand, all of these things that seem irrational really come out of probably somebody who did something untoward. Somebody got cross at somebody and they tried to cancel their electric. So now they make sure that they have a death certificate. So that is an unfortunate thing. But as Erin said, they're just going to shred it. They don't need that in their file. Yeah. I have a question, Erin.
Yes.
So I'm inclined to have a green burial, and my husband is inclined to be buried at sea.
Okay.
Are those things going to be possible?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, they are. So buried at sea, does that mean, is that a burial or is the cremation happen first and then you are buried
No,
at
I
sea?
think he would prefer no cremation because he doesn't want the emissions and whatnot.
So from a green burial standpoint, I know more on that. We have one green cemetery in our area. It's called, it's in Fountain Hill, and it's in the Niski Hill Cemetery.
Yep.
I just did research on there because I had a prearrangement for somebody that would like to be buried there. And what it is you get GPS coordinates and you're buried without any embalming. You are in a wicker casket and you are buried there, and you have rocks as tombstone, and it's very, very nice. But upon further research, because of this family I just had, I found out any cemetery really can be a green burial site, because what you do is you take the outer burial container, which is a requirement of the cemetery, and it's normally shaped like a U where it goes and it outlines the hole.
Turn it upside down.
But you turn it upside down instead. And so you put somebody in a casket that would be similar to like in an Orthodox Jewish or a Muslim setting, and you bury them with the casket touching the ground first. Then you put the outer burial container upside down. So you're still maintaining the requirements of the cemetery, but you're also honoring the wishes of that person. So from a green burial standpoint, that can be done pretty much anywhere and at any location. From a burial at sea with a true burial, I don't know if that's possible. if I'm being completely honest, I'm going to revert back to Mr. 40 years of experience, because I'm going to say it's not due to a disposition permit. When you have a body, you need a disposition permit, and I don't know who would get that
I
disposition.
think they do it for veterans, which is
Interesting.
yes.
Dan?
Anything to add?
I have nothing to add.
Nothing. All right. All right. Well, hopefully it will be a number of years and they'll come around.
They'll come up with a
Yes,
reason. They'll come
yes.
up with a way. So if there's a will, there's a way.
Yes.
I firmly believe that.
Sure. Just like they did at Veterans at Sea. They just, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
If you have a boat, there you go. It's a good way to make some money. Rent
Not
it out
Mary
for
Jo
burials at sea.
Kopechnik, no.
There's evidently a need.
Grant has a question.
Yes, sir.
Erin and Linda, I want to thank you very much for coming tonight. You've given us so much information. During your conversation with a couple, and they've decided they want to be cremated, do you advise them or do you let them know that whichever one dies first, you can hold the ashes until the second one and then put them together?
Those are things I personally talk about, yes. Some people find a great deal of comfort in having their loved ones' cremated remains with them, and other people think that complete opposite. They do not want them with them. That they make urns that are specifically designed for two adults. They're called companion urns. And there is a little bit of a cost savings in the sense that you only would bury the urn one time instead of doing a double burial, one at the first spouse and then one at the second. So those are things we talk about when we're doing the pre-arrangement process, just something to kind of keep in the back of their mind. Some people really find a great deal of comfort in that, and then others just don't. So all I do as a funeral director is I realize I'm the only one besides my dad in this room that know a whole lot about funerals. It's not something most people know. And so I'm just there to educate our families as they go through the process so that they can make the best choice for themselves as an educated consumer. Yes, sir.
This is going to sound a little, maybe morbid, but I know one of your employees, Keith Staley, and he was telling us about the crematory. Do you cremate one person at a time, or do you put multiple bodies in?
So HBO, I don't know if anyone's seen the show. They did us so dirty this year with funeral homes because they have really put this misconception out into the world. We do have our own crematory in Hellertown. We have 3 retorts and 1 person per retort. The cremation, that's like the crematory, the actual.
Yes.
Yeah. So that, yes, that's okay. The cremation process, which I didn't really touch on, is an interesting process. The retort or the oven has to go to 1800 degrees Fahrenheit before we can lift up the door. And once the door can get lifted, we place the person in. It goes up to about 2100 degrees Fahrenheit, and then it's about a 2-hour process. After that process is complete, there's a cool down in that 2 hours. Once the retort reaches a certain degree, we can then open the door again to bring that person back out. And the way in which we bring all the cremated remains out is with basically a large broom and a a little bit of a shovel, but mostly it's a broom, and it's also a blower, that air blower, so that you get all the cremated remains out, and then that gets taken to our processing step, which further goes into the urn then, which is step 3. So only 1 per cremation. That's different for animals, though, I will say. Yeah. You can choose to have a group cremation for animals. When you do that, you only have a certain part of the pet, but humans, 1 per.
Well, let me see. There you go.
Yeah.
Considering I went to school with your uncle.
Yes.
and you are my company, are we fully dressed when we go into there?
Into the
I don't want David to see me.
So, no, he wouldn't. And so every person, this is a crematory requirement, everybody goes in what's called an alternative container. An alternative container is something, a hard structure. So a person oftentimes is dressed in a hospital gown when they pass away, because more often than not, they're on hospice or they are in a hospital setting or in a nursing home. So if a family hasn't provided us with clothing that they wish to have their loved one cremated in, they are placed they're in a hospital gown, placed in an alternative container, whether that be a cardboard box or a pouch of some kind, to contain that person and be able to give them the dignity and the anonymity needed for a cremation.
All right, and I have some information here about burial at sea. It is legal and federally permitted in the U.S. under some Sanctuaries Act through specific regulations. Those specific regulations apply. Non-cremated remains must be buried at least 3 nautical miles from the shore and in waters that are at least 600 feet deep, while cremated remains have similar distance requirements. They don't have the depth requirement.
Which is silly, because cremains couldn't be more sterile than they are, but
yeah.
Okay. I did think of one thing that I mentioned. We don't see it so much anymore, but my way elderly clients often bought burial lots, sets of them, like 8, 16, 12. Just so you're aware, if you own more than 1 or 2, if you're a husband and wife and you have a plot of 4, those other 2 are considered an asset. So if you're on medical assistance, they count as an asset. And I can tell you, it's difficult to get rid of them. I currently have 4 lots in Monticello, Virginia. They are worth $15,000 a piece, and we cannot give them away because the opening and closing for each one of those lots would be more than $2,500. We have tried giving them to the veterans. We've tried giving them to American Legions. So my client cannot get on medical assistance because they inherited these burial lots.
Wow.
So if you did inherit burial lots because they come down through the family, you need to assign the ownership to your kids. Get them out of your hands. Okay.
That's interesting. My parents have, was my grandfather. I think he purchased like 10 plots all in the same area over in Highland Cemetery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, people mean well. They call us and they'll say to us, "We'll just give you them," but there's nothing for it, because even if say a family there's a financial need and it would restrict them from getting buried, there's still the opening and closing charges, which are oftentimes $2,000-$3,000 to open and close a grave. And so while the gift of the space is nice, it doesn't eliminate all the figures and the fees required to have someone buried traditionally. I know you had a question. Do you still have?
Do you have a question? Okay. What did I do with the mic? There you go.
Okay, Linda.
Yes.
It's probably going to be more you. As we're talking about the plots, the cemetery plots, and passing down through the lineage. Obviously, I have that issue going on as well. Do I have to contact the lawyer to take care of that, or it seems like I would just go to the cemetery and my sisters and I would take care of that, but passing it down to the next generation, do they need to seek a lawyer, or can we just do that through the cemetery?
You can do it through the cemetery, and most of the time they prefer it that way. Okay. Now, I believe we might be okay. So Patty is in Canada.
Patty's in Canada.
Patty's never going to come here and get buried.
No, she's not coming here.
So she could actually disclaim any interest. I believe we're within 6 months, so she could do a disclaimer and say, not interested. So could anybody who already has their own burial lots. But you need to do a disclaimer within a period of the person dying, okay? So to be a valid disclaimer, it needs to be done in 6 months.
6 months.
6 months,
Okay,
yeah.
thanks.
Hey, Pastor Janet. Yeah.
In 1971, my father-in-law bought 10 lots over here at Grandview. Well, of course, now my wife's there, my daughter's there, and that left us, myself, with 3 because my wife and I are going to be cremated. The last 2 lots, I went to Trexler and I asked them if I could give them to my daughter, and they did.
Good.
No charge.
Right.
They transferred those 2 lots to my daughter. Now, my brother-in-laws are above, they have 4 lots. I don't know what they're going to do with them because none of them live around here. But yeah, you have a good question there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right.
In red, do you have a question?
And I have a question for you. I'm sorry. You said you're going to be cremated. Do you intend to be interred or just cremated and not interred? Because you could still use those lots if you're going to have your cremains interred. Okay. So you will use them.
All right, so he was just saying he wants to be buried and the military paid for his headstones already. Does she have a question? She has a question. Okay.
My question is, like, okay, if we do we get everything prepared and everything like that, and we want to prepay and do it like a CD or something like that, do we have to put away everything that's required that, let's say it's an estimate of $20,000. Will we need to do that, or could we do a partial, or?
Absolutely. So in a CD standpoint, we do intervals of $1,000. With a CD, you have to open up an individual CD with every incremental payment. So what oftentimes I'll do with if somebody wants to do partial payments, we'll do like, if you save $4,000, say that for easy math, the funeral's $12,000, and you want to do 3 increments, and you put $4,000 away, and then in a year another 4, and then another 4. You can do that, no problem. In a life insurance policy, you can also do payments as well, and they can break them down even through the month, like down to the monthly payments, which is a nice option for people sometimes. The only thing I will say, my Pennsylvania Dutch is coming out, you end up paying way more for the funeral because the life insurance company is taking the risk on your life, and so if you happen to pass away before the funeral is paid for, if it's within if it's after 1 year and and all the health questions are answered properly, they'll pay for the full funeral, even if you've only paid 1 year out of a 10-year policy. And so because of that, you end up paying more with interest. So it's
okay if you die before you actually do pass away.
Right, but you have to disclose that in the life insurance, and then they don't give you as much. So it's if something happens and you pass away before you've prepaid for the whole funeral and you're in life insurance, they would pay for it as a result, but you end up paying more. Yes, sir. Who contacts the life insurance company? That's a good question. So the question's who contacts the life insurance companies? If the funeral home would require what's called an assignment, which is proof that the funds will come to the funeral home will take care of calling on your family's behalf. If the funeral home says, you as the beneficiary get the funds, and then you pay us once the funds have cleared into your account, then we would leave that up to the family to do that. No matter what, you need a death certificate, so the death certificate can't be issued for sometimes it's about 24 to 96 business hours. It's somewhere in that range. So from a funeral home perspective, we could, get the ball rolling from, if we needed to have an assignment done for whatever the reason. But from a family perspective, it doesn't happen often until after the funeral has occurred.
All right, thank you. Can I come and have a seat? You've been standing a long time. This has really been very informative. Thank you to both of you very, very much. Can we give them a round of applause?
Thanks.
These are not easy conversations. But you have approached them with courage and strength tonight, and I applaud you for it, for showing up, for facing something that sometimes people just want to close the door on. So I am very proud of all of you for entering into some of these hard conversations. We have more work to do. What I'd like to do sometime in October is to gather downstairs in Fellowship Hall to actually work on some paperwork, whether that be powers of attorney, living wills, working out something known as 5 wishes, which talks about how you would like to handle the end of your life with grace and dignity, both to the medical professionals as well as your family and to the funeral home. So those are conversations that we can look forward to having, and we'll be able to sit around tables and maybe ask some more spiritual questions at that time than the practical ones that we did this evening, because they're just really important questions. And no one is alone in those questions, and I think that's something that I want you to know. If you are thinking of something, chances are someone is as well, and it's not a silly question. It's not a worry that you should be embarrassed or feel shame about. If there's something, a question that you've got going on, whether it's emotionally driven or spiritually driven or from your experience, let's keep having these conversations together. Thank you so much.
Can you clearly state, information about Heintzelman, locations, phone number, and website, anything that would be helpful for the video so people know where to call?
Sure. So our funeral home is located in Schnecksville. We are found online at www.heintzelmancares.com. Our phone number in Schnecksville is 610-799-3125.
And how about your law office?
So the law office is Noonan Law Office. We're located 526 Walnut Street, downtown in Allentown, and the number is 610-433-5211. Be sure to ask for Linda. My husband Tom is there, and my sister-in-law Susan is there, and our daughter, who was there, just recently left. So it gets a little confusing. They'll say, "Oh, we want the female attorney," and there were 3 of us. So you need to ask for Linda.
Thank you. Any further comments before we close in prayer this evening? Okay, thank you. Let us pray. Creator God, you have known each one of our names from the very beginning of time, and you have walked with us through our ups and through our downs, and we know that you will continue to do so, and we have faith and trust in you, that you will continue to lead us in our lives, and we thank you for your presence. Thank you for the opportunity to be together tonight, God, to have hard conversations, and to know that you are with us in them. As we leave here tonight, travel with us home safely. Help us to ponder these things, to start to get organized, to continue the hard conversations, because with you, God, we know that all things are possible. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks, everybody, for coming. We appreciate you being here tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you both so much. That was great.